So we are in the third week of Advent, which is a season where Christians like you and I all over the world reflect on what it means for us to be a people who wait on God, to know what it means to wait on God, to build up that endurance, to be people that wait on God. And so Advent is the 4 weeks leading into Christmas. And just as we are approaching Christmas and coming closer and waiting for Christmas, we remember how it was for the world when they were waiting for the first Christmas, right? The world was dark, waiting for the light of God to come in. And we're waiting for Jesus to break in and come to the earth. And in the same way we're remembering that during this Advent season, we're also reflecting on the reality that the world is waiting for Jesus to come a second time, right? That's when he comes and makes everything right again. When he makes everything new again. When the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God. When Jesus comes again. And we are longing, God, we need you to break into this world and make everything right. That's part of what we're remembering during Advent. But the other thing that is really personal for each and every one of us, I think we can all think of times in our life where we're desperate for God to break in to our lives right here, right now. Not just in the future, but right now. I'm experiencing suffering, pain, disillusionment, loss, loneliness, whatever it is. And we're like, God, I need you to break in. I'm calling out to you. And we remember during this time of Advent that part of this is to be a people that wait on God, that say, God, I know you break through, but I'm longing for you. I'm desperate for you. And one of the opportunities we have during Advent season, it's a way to kind of work out our spiritual muscles as we reflect on all these truths so that you and I can become a people that have a greater endurance, a greater strength, that we are more effective, more ability, a greater capacity to be someone that can actually wait on God. Because the waiting is hard, but we want to grow in the ability. We know he's going to break in. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few insights from scriptures that I think will help build us up to make us stronger in our ability as Christians to wait on God to break in. And so we're going to spend most of the time in Galatians chapter 4. Starting in verse 4, let me read this. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son. The first thing to realize, what does it say? Is in God's perfect timing. God had perfect timing. At the perfect time, God broke into the world. And so how many of you guys know that timing really does matter? There are certain situations where if you show up a little too early, you're going to miss out. Or if you show up a little too late, you miss out. There are lots of areas in our life that timing matters. I think of just that practical one. If you're roasting a chicken, right? And you take that chicken out of the oven too soon. It looks golden brown and delicious. Smells great. You cut into it, and it's raw up in there. And you find yourself, you had eaten some raw chicken. We know what's coming next. And they throwing up all over the place, and tears running down your face, and snot and poop everywhere. I mean, you took it out too soon, right? In the same way, you could take that chicken, and you could wait too long. You take it out too late, and it is all dried up. And you got the hacksaw out and you're cutting the chicken. It's all dried up. And you got your little children eating these little chicken flavored hunks of wood. And they're like, it gets stuck in their trachea. And every one of your children's choking and you have to run around the table. Cindy Lou! And you do the Heimlich maneuver. Oh, little Timmy, come here. You have to do the Heimlich maneuver on all your kids. And there's tears and snot and poop everywhere. It's like, because you waited too long. The poop is because they were scared that they were going to die. I mean, you know what I'm talking about with little kids. Like, perfect timing matters in a lot of areas. And so much more so. When God sent forth his son, it was at the perfect timing. All of history was aligned perfectly for God to make the greatest impact. But I think something we all can reflect on and realize, the world that was waiting in darkness, they probably didn't feel like God's timing was perfect while they're waiting, hopeless. They probably felt like God's running a little late. And I think that's something we all experience, right? Or at least most of us experience times where it's like, God, I'm calling on you. Why haven't you shown up? We experience that, like, sometimes it feels like God is running late. But what we know from his word, he's always on time. He's always right on time. We can experience that retrospectively. When we look in the rearview mirror, it seems like we see things much more clearly. We can even think of times in our life where it's like, I thought God was running late. But when he showed up, now I can realize it was the perfect timing. Didn't feel like that in the waiting. And even more so, the reality, we can look back in the rearview mirror, Jesus' first coming, when at the perfect time God came into the world, it was perfect timing. See, if God's plan when he was sent his son into the world was for his son to come and preach a message, the gospel of the kingdom of God, and that God's plan and desire was for that message to spread throughout the whole world, for his message to go viral, there was no more perfect time in all of history than the time when he sent forth his son. We can see that now retrospectively. Historians and scholars agree. God's plan, if he would have just come a little earlier, would have missed out on that opportunity for his message to go viral. If he would have come just a little bit later, the historical variables were not aligned in the same way and wouldn't have gone viral in the same way. There's lots of different historical variables we can look at. I just want to highlight a few. The first one is the Roman Empire. Was around at that time. And not just that the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the world and had a lot of control in the world, but also even within the Roman Empire, there was this little season of time, this little bubble of golden opportunity called the Pax Romana is what they called it, which means the peace of Rome. So within, not of all Roman history, but just this little bubble of time in Roman history, this Pax Romana, in which created perfect conditions for the gospel to go viral in a way it wouldn't have otherwise. If he would have come a little earlier or a little later, missed the opportunity. Here's a couple conditions that it created. Because of the Pax Romana, because of this peace of Rome, you could travel safely and efficiently in a way you could not otherwise in another place. And see how that's important to go viral? For your message to be able, I can get it from here to there and from there to here. Couldn't have done it as efficiently and as fast as you did as it happened in the Pax Romana. In the same way, it was created a condition because of the Roman Empire that the vast majority of the world spoke a common trade language. And so now once you efficiently get to the place, now you can effectively communicate the message in a way you couldn't have if you would have come a little bit earlier or a little bit later. You see how God's perfect timing, he sees all of history in a way we don't. They didn't feel like it was perfect timing, but God knew, God knows, and he's waiting. He's waiting to come at the right time. So another condition is that God had created a people, set apart a people for himself, and been preparing them for hundreds of years, the Jews, the Israelites. And one of the conditions that set it up to be a perfect opportunity for God to break in and send forth his son and go viral with his message was that the Israelites were being oppressed by the Roman Empire. That actually sounds like a really bad thing, doesn't it? But we know retrospectively it was perfect conditions. So here's the reality. They're in their feeling, this doesn't seem like a good plan, God, us being oppressed by the Roman government. But God's like, no, it's perfect. Just trust me. See, we can know this now when we reflect on the book of Romans where it says, and we know that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. For us to be a people that know how to wait on God, we need to remember he has perfect timing and he works all things together for good. Even if you're like, this situation doesn't seem like part of God's plan, we trust him. God, we know you see. We know you know. Other realities happening that created the perfect environment for God's message to go viral is the Israelites at the time, while they're being oppressed by the Romans, they were both a centralized religion and a decentralized religion. There's just this small bubble in history where the Jews were both centralized, having a temple where everybody came and gathered and masses would come, both centralized and decentralized. If it would happen a little bit earlier, you didn't have both conditions. If it happened a little bit later, you no longer have both conditions. And both conditions were super important for God's message to go viral. The decentralized is the fact that Pastor John mentioned this a couple weeks ago, the synagogue system. That all over the world, there were these little groups of people gathering to worship the living God and to learn his word. All over the world. What we know historically is all it took is 10 Jewish men in any little corner of the world. If there's just 10 men, they can start a synagogue. So what we know is there's little synagogues over here in the corner and the woods, in the middle of the woods. There's medium size in this village. There's large synagogues in this city. All over the world, there's synagogues. You see how that began to set up a conduit for God's message to go viral, how his timing was perfect. One condition there specifically in the synagogues that we need to appreciate of why it's so powerful that the message went so far and so wide and so fast is in each synagogue, there were the Jewish people meeting, but then non-Jewish people were allowed to come and sit in the synagogue. They had to sit in the back. They couldn't really talk. They just had to observe. But those people sitting in the back, they were there because they wanted to know more about the living God. They wanted to worship him. And they were told week after week, hey, you can come watch, but you can't participate. What do you think that means when the gospel came into those places? Little kindling boxes. The spark of the gospel came, and now we have fire everywhere. The fire of the gospel just spreading across the world. In God's perfect timing, he came. We see that now. We can appreciate that now. In the moment, they felt like they were in darkness. We want to be a people that really trust that God has his perfect plan, his perfect timing. He's always on time. Thank you for the amen. Woo! Let's get noisy in here. All right. Let's look at the passage again. Galatians 4, starting in verse 4. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. So not only are we trusting that God's timing is perfect, and that's why we can wait on him, we can also know a little bit about the God we're waiting on. This is the God who became man, who got down on our level. And that's so important to reflect on when we want to grow our strength and our trust to be a people that wait on him. It's like God became man. He is among us. He is with us. He dwells with us. And there's so much richness to all that means that God became man. But just one point I want to encourage us to think on today. Psalms 113 says this: Who is like the Lord our God, the one who sits high and lifted up, enthroned in heaven. Reflect on the bigness and awesomeness of God. That's so encourage us to be like, we can trust you, we can wait on you, you see what we don't see. But the second part really, really reinforces this. He's not only the one high and lifted up, he's the one who stoops down and looks at the heaven and earth. He's the God who left heaven to come and be with us. He's the God that will stoop, will get on our level and become us. And I'll tell you why that's so important. Let's make this example from Hebrews, it says this. Since then we have a great high priest, that's Jesus, who passed through the heavens, the high priest, God, in heaven, the high and lifted up one. He passed through heaven, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted and yet is without sin. Here's what we know in the waiting. It's hard. It's painful. God. Sometimes we begin to feel, God, it feels like you're running late. It feels like you don't hear my prayers. It feels like you just don't understand the pain, the discouragement, the disillusionment. And God can say, I understand. Like, I know. I know exactly where you're at and how you feel. And that's why he's the kind of God. We can trust that he sees the big picture, but we can also know that he's thinking of you. And he cares about you, each individual in the big picture. And we can trust that. And knowing he's the God that will stoop down and be with us. And he understands. Let's look at the Psalms again. The second part of this verse is our third point. Who is like the Lord our God, the one who sits enthroned on high, who stoops down and looks at the heavens and the earth. This is what happens when he stoops down. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He's not only the God that comes and stoops down against our level. He's the God that lifts us up. When we're crying out, God, just help me out here. He comes and he's like, I want to lift you up. But there's an important reality of what it means for him to lift you up that will really change our expectations and help us grow in strength to be a people that wait on God. Listen how he lifts us up. We'll go back to our main passage in Galatians. It says this, Galatians chapter 4. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those of us, to begin to lift us up, to redeem us who are under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. Not just to lift us up a little bit, but to lift us up and bring us into himself and into his family, so that we might receive adoption as a son. And because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So we are no longer slaves, but sons, and if sons, then heirs through God. This is the thing to realize. God stoops down and lifts us up. And we're waiting on, God, will you just help me get through this year? I just need a little help up. But understand what God's really waiting on. He doesn't want to just lift you up a little bit. He wants to lift you up fully into the fullness of what he has for you in his life. And when we realize he's not just waiting for the perfect time to lift you up a little, he's waiting for the perfect time to bring you into a place of more than you can ask or imagine. And we got to trust him that he knows when that is. We think, God, if you would have just showed up yesterday, it would have been a better situation. He's like, I'm not just trying to get you through the day. I'm trying to bring you into the fullness of what I have for you. And so that's why we can wait on him, because his eyes are seeing what's the greatest I can bring you into, not just get you through this little hump, this little desire that you think so big. Like, hey, listen, I see the big picture. Trust me. Let's look at this last passage here in Isaiah 30. Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you. That word longing is the same word in Hebrew that means to wait. It's a rich word. It's full of depth and meaning and angles. And so that idea of the Lord waits to be gracious to you. He's longing. He's anticipating. He's like, okay, I have the big picture in mind. And when everything lines up to make the greatest good in this circumstance, that's when I'm going to come. Not too early, not too late. Just trust me. I'm waiting. I'm anticipating even more than you are. You think you're longing, but I'm longing for the perfect time because I love you and I want the best for you. Just trust me in the middle of your trial and your suffering, your disillusionment, your unanswered prayers. Trust me. I'm waiting for the perfect time to bring the greatest good. I long to be gracious to you. Therefore, he will rise up and show compassion, for the Lord is the God of justice. Blessed are you who wait on him. God's waiting to be gracious to you. Blessed if you can wait on him. Can you just wait on him? Can you long for him? Anticipate him? Hold on. Another really important part of this concept of this word in the Hebrew, it's not just this longing and this waiting, this anticipation. It also means to hold on, to cling to wrap around. Blessed are you who hold on to God while you're waiting. He's longing. Can you just do it? I think of the first time I went to Disney World. Anybody ever been to Disney World? I was like 5 or 6, so it was the 70s. Anybody been to Disney World in the 70s? It was a little different. You ever ride the ride Space Mountain? Okay, in the 70s. Space Mountain is this indoor roller coaster. Sounds kind of cool, but when you're 5 years old, it's really scary because it's dark. I'm already scared of the dark, and then I'm on a roller coaster. And the roller coaster cars were different in the 70s. They didn't have like these big shoulder straps that come down and hug you really tight. No, it's like this 2-seater car with this just little bar. Like that's what's holding you in. And I'm 5 years old. And the roller coaster goes, and I'm slinging all over the place. I'm literally getting lifted off my seat. I'm so scared. Man, it's freaking me out. And so I slide up under the bar, and I get onto the floor of the roller coaster, and I wrap my whole body around my dad's legs. And I'm just like, whoosh, whoosh, flying all over the place. And I'm just holding on. And I got tears and snot and poop everywhere. And I'm just holding on, waiting. That is the picture. Sometimes in our suffering, sometimes in our pain, in our fear. Just holding on, God. I trust you. You're my rock. I'm going to hold on to you. You're going to get me through this. That's what it means to wait on God. Yes, there's this joyful anticipation. Yes, there's this trust in him. But sometimes it's like, all I can do is cling. We need strength to cling to God this morning.